Introducing
Real estate people.
Hey, we're the Bills! What are you talking about, Willis?
We're the real estate people.
Welcome back to the Real Estate People podcast. My name is Eric Arnath, and
I am Nicholas Giambra.
there he is. We're toying around with a new format for our podcast, 20-minute episodes for the 20-minute drive that most Buffalonians do. And, we're going live today, too, for the first time, which is a lot of fun. And we actually just got a question from a listener. So we're going to get into that. And then we're going to get into a little bit of news around what's happening with Zillow right now. I got a personal story to share. And then if we have time, we'll get into some tips and tricks for residential consumers and commercial investor type people as well. Sound good?
Let's roll.
All right, let's get to that question.
All right, boys. How does a rural development loan work?
Rural development loans.
Rural development loans. So taking out loans to do developments in rural areas.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, there are a ton of programs out there where lenders will lend money on vacant land. So the typical story is you need to have cash to acquire vacant land. We just did a deal with Community Bank, who financed 80% of the price of the land, is willing to combine that loan to acquire the land into the construction loan to eventually convert it to permanent financing. So that's like an example of how it would work on one home with one person financing land, financing construction, and then converting it to the permanent loan at the end. But how to do that as a developer, like for multiple homes, I'd say your best bet there is probably going to be private money. Who's going to be your capital partner that helps you execute, and then what's that loan agreement with that investor? I've never heard of. I mean, it probably exists. We got to bring in
Right.
like David Capreto or Morano to help us answer that question, but we'll get back to you on that.
No,
for
well,
sure.
well, here's where our value comes in, right? Real estate is a complex thing, and there are many different aspects to each different transaction. Every transaction is different, and you need different professionals to help in each type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
So where a realtor comes in is we are not professionals in every single aspect of the transaction, but we are kind of the center point that most people come to first. So we build an incredible network of professionals so that when there's a question that we don't know the answer to, we know who has that answer. So it's always best to come to the realtor with the question first, but don't expect the realtor to always know the answer, because we rely on attorneys and lenders and appraisers and inspectors and contractors, all these different people who are experts in their particular piece. So in this case, who do they call? It's really about talking with a lender first, right? Do we have any, lenders that we would maybe recommend?
Yeah, I'm going to shout out that Community Bank.
Yeah.
They're financing residential lots on the west side for people to buy a lot with a loan,
Yeah.
finance the construction as part of that process, and then convert it to an end loan at the end. So I'd say Community Bank is a good resource to talk to right now, who has in-house programs that they do but this isn't stuff that's traded on secondary markets. So it's not a product you can go get from M&T Bank or Key Bank or whoever these other like large loan originators are. It's something that an institution is going to do in-house, not underwritten in-house and then traded on the secondary market.
Okay. So Community Bank, look them
Community
up,
Bank would be a good
give
option.
them a call.
But also talk to some developers that have track record of building subdivisions in rural areas.
Yeah.
And they're just a phone call away, but it's like finding the confidence to find the number, dial it, and have that conversation with the person.
That's where we come in too. A lot of times a consumer will call me and ask a question and they don't know who to call. Or if I just give them a number, they're like, okay, now I have to do this. But a lot of times we have relationships with these people. We just say, hey, you want to get on a 3-way call? Then they have someone holding their hand through the conversation. Hey, I have, Joe Schmo here. He's got a question for you. And because that person, the developer has a relationship with you, they're ready to have that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And there's going to be developers that aren't not willing to have that conversation with you.
Sure.
And then there's going to be ones that are.
Yeah.
And like that is part of the value prop as the agent to the consumer is like we know who the people are to go ask these questions. It's likely that we've done business with them in the past. So we're going to get, good answers that will save them a lot of time and energy from figuring all of this stuff out on their own.
Yeah.
And if we didn't answer that question good enough, just make another comment in the chat and we'll get back to you as soon as this episode ends with more information to help you with that question for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So we wanted to get into our shoot the shit segment, which is, a little bit about what's going on in our lives or what's going on in the news and real estate or just something that we want to give a hot take on, whatever that looks like. And today we just have in bold letters, Zillow. So do you want to set that up a little bit and we can dive into it? What do we want to talk about Zillow? I know there's lots of different opinions.
Oh man, Zillow, this is a tough question.
Yeah.
I could speak on this from like being a shareholder and in buying their stock at $195. That's
I think
currently
most
traded
people
today
aren't
at 30
there though.
But Zillow is a player in this market.
Yeah.
Zillow is the lead technology-driven company that is trying to shape the way that consumers and realtors engage in a new marketplace that's different than what exists today. But the problem is that they haven't played nice with anybody within the industry. They haven't played nice with the agents. They haven't played nice with the brokers. They've literally infiltrated through the back end of the local organizations that realtors pay to get real information that realtors have, like they're showing data, like they're trying to do right now with offer data.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using realtors' position in the existing transaction to extract data to then go give to a consumer to get them starting to think about how they can do this on their own. But then they've competed with the consumer, the agent, the broker, and everybody else along the way, and they have a bunch of shareholders, and their stock price sucks.
How are they competing with the consumer?
So, like where I've seen them do a disservice to the consumer is treating the consumer's interest as a commodity. So they, in theory, have kind of treated the consumer like a commodity, right? Every time a consumer liked something, shared something, viewed something, spent more than 30 seconds on looking at the photos of something, they've used that information to their best, to what works best for them. Whatever their economic model is within Zillow, which could be realtors paying per zip code, or it could to like show up on these listings, or realtors paying a referral fee once that transaction closes. So in theory, what they've done is they've created lead disassociation between who the listing agent is for that house and who the consumers are contacting for information about that home. So they've kind of created this gap between who should be taking that call versus who is, and it became the highest paying realtor.
Yeah, whoever is paying for those calls to come to them from Zillow. You click contact an agent, it goes to someone who's paying for that call to come to them.
And now if you're a realtor who pays for these leads, right, it's very expensive. So for somebody who's currently running a real estate team, I don't see where that profit margin is in the operating expenses to be able to even afford to transact those deals with Zillow. But now that you have to pay Zillow, they show up on your P&L, and now your realtor needs to adjust their services and their pricing to account for the increased expense with them paying Zillow for the lead, when the consumer only wanted to talk to the listing agent, but they got the highest paying agent who was willing to pay money for that lead. And to me, that's a skip the line mentality.
Yeah, and that agent doesn't really know anything about the property when you first get on the call with them.
And that agent's job is to sell that house today, because if that person doesn't buy a house today, they don't have a relationship with that person to maybe go out next weekend and look at a few more houses.
Sure.
So it just creates this, like, to me, it just feels like psychological warfare, right? With like what's happening at a national level, what Zillow's doing in the industry, and how our positions in all of this like shake out. But Zillow's tough, man. And you have a story about Zillow that I wanted a bucket to puke into after hearing you tell me what happened after you spent 12 months of your life helping or working with somebody to help them execute their purchasing desire. So if you have will you spend a few minutes and tell that story to the audience?
I want to share the story, but I'm still processing how I feel about it. I'm still processing what that means for me as an agent in the long run. I don't really have very strong opinions about any of it besides being upset that I lost a client that I built a relationship with. You know, I had a buyer client who, you know, we got connected through a referral, but we instantly hit it off. We got along great. Set them up on a search, and I've shown them over the last year at least 25 houses. They were not in a rush, and so it was kind of like I would send them, hey, what do you think about this house? And then they would send me something like a couple weeks later, hey, let's go look at this house. But I was always following up, always making sure that we were, you know, that we were connected. And more recently, something changed with her where her timeline got a lot shorter. She needed to find something quick. And I couldn't accommodate the amount of houses that she wanted to see.
In one specific weekend.
She said, hey, let's go see 6 houses Saturday and 5 houses on Sunday. Now, I would have loved to do that. And I know that I was so close to the finish line with her, you know.
That's another 11 hours of work on one weekend minimum.
Yeah. But I didn't even say that I can't accommodate. All I told her was, let me look at my calendar. I'm going to try to work it out. And even if I can't make it to all of them, I'm going to find an agent who can, that's from my team, that can help you at least open the doors, and then I'll follow up with you after you see the houses. She goes, okay, great. Then, you know, I know when Then she gets back to me a couple minutes later. You know what? Never mind. Our schedule changed a little bit, and a couple of the houses that we like the most, we're going to see at the open houses. So I'm like, that's great. Okay. I said, let me know how they go. I'll follow up with you. During the open house, I texted her. After the open house, I texted her and asked her, hey, how did it go? What do you think? No response. The next day, asked again, hey, how did it go? Would you like to submit an offer on any of these houses? And her reply was, hey, we want to thank you so much for the service that you gave to us. It was really, really helpful, all the questions that you answered and all this. But we ended up going under contract this weekend. We clicked the button on Zillow, connect me with an agent on a house, and that agent answered the call. They submitted an offer, and they're under contract. Now you have this agent who paid for that lead, right? So the agent probably feels like they deserve it because they're paying for those leads. But here I have been working for a year. I get, in Nick's words, bubkiss for this, right? And at the end of the day, honestly, my main goal for clients is for them to end up happy at the end of the day. But also, obviously, I'm doing this as a career, right? So there is money involved. And my top priority is for someone to be happy, but I also am doing it because I have a family. And so now all that time was wasted, you know? And so it was slightly frustrating, to say the least, that it was that
hurts,
easy,
man,
that it was that easy
that
for her
much time
to,
with somebody over the course of 12 months.
Yeah.
Being available every single time that they needed something from you.
Mm-hmm.
Even because so many consumers even just send you like a listing and they say like, what do you think of this house? Like that takes a good realtor, like 30 to 45 minutes to like answer appropriately. Cause you got to look at what it last sold for. Right. Is there any existing debt on it? You want to browse through the property condition disclosure. Yeah. Take a quick look at comps to see like how this house is priced. You got to have an understanding of what days on market means, if there's offer deadlines. So there's a lot that goes into just that simple answer of that question, what do you think of this home? If you actually want a powerful statement about what somebody thinks about a home. So you're doing all that with somebody for 12 months, looking at 25, 30 houses. And we're not pushy salespeople, right? We're going to help you buy the house that you choose that you want to buy. And we're just going to help you get it at the best possible price, with as little liability as possible as that transaction progresses.
Right.
And somebody clicks a make offer or take a tour button, gets hooked up with an agent that's willing to pay for leads because they are unwilling to go produce them on their own for whatever reason, which that's a whole episode in and of itself of why agents aren't able to lead generate. And that person got your deal. Yeah. And like they got my deal too, because you work for me, or you work not for me, you work with me.
Yeah,
we are together.
We have a mutual agreement that because I'm on your team, I give a certain percentage of my commission to you, but in exchange, you give me lots of resources, access to staff.
And consumers like realize like, so that was 12 months of looking at houses with Eric, but there was so much work even beyond, like before that 12 months that he started working with them. Somebody got a marketing lead. Somebody onboarded that customer to be a client. Somebody nurtured that relationship until they were ready to actually put their attention towards purchasing a home. Then somebody put all their time and energy into helping that person execute based on what they told him they wanted. He was not driving that. And then they take a tour button, and next thing you know, Zillow makes money. That other agent, who was willing to cut the line to get that lead, makes money. And it just sheds so much light into the flawed ecosystem that exists today, and who are the people that are actually playing in this space, and how they appreciate what goes down.
Right. But the reason I'm torn about it is because it really was so easy. You click a button, you get connected to somebody, and now you have a house. And for a consumer, apart from their main allegiance is not to their agent, although...
Well, theirs wasn't.
Sure.
Your people's weren't there.
Yeah.
Some people's are.
But most people, their main priority is to find a house that works for
themselves.
And if it's that easy to click and submit an offer and now you're under contract, I see the value in that, apart from my personal feelings about this specific thing.
But do you think that person that wrote the deal who got the lead from Zillow, you think they ran comps with the purchaser before deciding what to offer?
Probably not.
Do you think they had conversations with that consumer about what's the most this house is going to appraise for? Or how bad do you want this house? Or how does this house actually relate to the quality of life that you're saying you want because you have 2 kids that are in school, and because you want to be able to walk to a grocery store, or because you care how natural light comes? You know what I mean?
What
Just
the thing that sucks,
of life
though,
type stuff.
The thing that sucks now that I'm thinking about it is that agent probably didn't have to do that because of all the things that the clients learned from me. They probably knew
what they wanted,
what that house was actually worth, what they should offer, because they're looking in a very specific area. We looked at all the other houses together. So the agent didn't have to do the work because I already did it for him, pretty much.
So it's tough thinking about how you navigate within all these different ecosystems that are just like right in front of us that we need to be conscious of as we do our thing with our business.
Here's another thing, though. If someone was working with someone else, another agent, and they were working with them for a year, and that person, for whatever reason, gave you a call or gave me a call and said, hey, I really want to go see this house. I've been working with this other agent, but I want to go see it now. And if we like it, I'll write the contract with you. I would like to say that at the very least, I would call that other agent just to preserve my own reputation within the industry and with other realtors. I don't want to burn bridges, right? I want to be upstanding and honest Would you take it though? Would you write the offer?
They're actually the best type of buying clients to take on, the clients that were running around looking at houses with another agent for a year. It's the best person because they're educated at that point.
Yeah.
But how do you provide that type of education to the consumer before they're ready to make the transaction?
Yeah.
But Eric, to me, it would hurt less if it happened naturally with like another referral partner rather than it being Zillow, because of how Zillow has gained their position within the marketplace today. Because they've used the realtors to get the information that the consumers desire, repackaged it, rebundled it, gave it to the consumers who are now like, they didn't deserve that information in the first place. They never paid for it. They just partnered with our local MLSs and purchased a bunch of companies that already existed to get that data that now that they have to help those consumers think through some of the more important questions about the real estate.
Yeah. We're wrapping up here, but does a consumer, do they pay more or less if they click on that button and gets connected with Zillow? Like, is that person, well, I guess that person doesn't pay. What am I going to ask? Does the amount of commission change in total? I know it gets divvied out a different way if it goes through Zillow, but does the total commission change?
No, not
Right.
not necessarily. That commission that's offered on that listing is still determined by the seller while signing that listing paperwork at the beginning.
Right.
So the consumer is not paying more money to do it that way. But in the long run, it is making real estate more expensive because that disassociation that people are that Zillow's created with treating the consumer like a commodity and then selling that commodity they created back to the agent. So that does make it more expensive in the long run. Although people really do get a lot of value out of using Zillow as a marketplace to search for homes. It's unbelievable for that.
Right.
And that's where the MLS fucked up.
Right. So then it really boils down to if you're selling a home, or if you're buying a home, if you want the local person who lives in the area who's going to answer your call whenever, and they're not just a random person that's paying for you to get in contact with them. If you want someone who's going to be able to like really understand the value of the home and have relationships with all the other realtors and talk to them about the value, and like it's real like boots on the ground insight as opposed to a Zillow agent, like that, go with an agent as opposed to clicking that button. It all depends on what the consumer values and what they're looking for.
And that's what's changing, and that's what people need to be conscious of and
Yeah.
be asking the right questions around.
Yeah. One more thought. I had a seller tell me that they believe they know what their house is worth. They wanted to sell it because of the Zestimate. When I did my own research, I realized that the Zestimate of the home was at least $20,000 higher than it should be, because Zillow, they look at an average of an area. This house was in Kenmore, so they look at Kenmore as a whole and they come up with an average. They just spit out a number based on what other houses in Kenmore are sold for. But in Kenmore, if you are a boots on the ground type person, you're going to know that each block you get away from Delaware towards Military, that impacts the value of the home. This house was in between Elmwood and Military, which is on the further side away from the hub of the village on Delaware. Mm-hmm. And I was able to explain to the seller that the Zestimate was not correct because of the location within the village, right?
Because values could be so much different if you're between Colvin and Irving.
Exactly.
Or if you're between Elmwood and Military.
Exactly. So I still think it's worth talking to a local expert.
Yeah, it's corporate governance, right, of yourself.
Yeah.
Trust, verify, trust, verify, trust, verify.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great conversation today. The last couple episodes, we've talked about some really important and like kind of heavy things, but I'm just happy to be here talking through real estate stuff, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you soon.